Well, it's Monday, March 28th, 2022. I'm Andy Johnson. Good morning. Welcome to the program. This is how we're going to start the ball rolling here this morning and for this brand new week on the program on WESN-CC Content Capital. Talking Point will come up, of course, at 8 o'clock, just after the news. But right now, we're getting ready to start AM Prime. Let's tell you what's coming down the pike this morning. We'll be talking with a man in Tobago, Barry Loveless. He's chairman of the Tobago Reforestation and Watershed Rehabilitation Committee. He made a statement the other day that, well, certainly sparked our interest. He says that he is seeing that food prices for us in Trinidad and Tobago are in jeopardy of going up higher because of what is happening in Ukraine. So we're trying to get to him from a perspective from him on that, how in fact food prices will rise, how they see it in Tobago. And he's talking about reforestation and watershed rehabilitation. And that's in the second hour of the program. We have our watch list, we have our look around the Caribbean, we're going to Guyana. Lots of stuff happening there with a statement by the former president, who's now the vice president. He says Trinidad and Tobago is falling apart, as he was talking about the need for further diversification and not dependent on oil and minerals as we have done. And this caused a lot of pushback. In the paper this morning, we have, at least in the Express, and I've seen it, a response to that from our Minister of Foreign CARICOM Affairs, Dr. Amory Brown. He's pushing back hard on that, and my understanding is that the minister is under some stress in Guyana as well for that statement. So that's going to come up, of course. Moments from now, we'll be talking with the head of the EU delegation in Trinidad and Tobago, Ambassador Peter Cavendish, as well as his counterpart, the Ukrainian ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago. He's based in New York, Sergei Kizlytsia. They put out a joint statement for a number of embassies servicing Trinidad and Tobago, those here, those in the EU, and those outside of the EU, including the US Embassy, as well as the British High Commission, standing with Trinidad and Tobago and standing with CARICOM on that issue. The statement that we issued some weeks ago concerning the war in Ukraine. We'll get to that in a moment, but we will take a break and come back shortly.
We dare you to dream, to see beyond the struggle, to envision the possibilities, to live life with unlimited vision. Ferrera Optical supports you with complete eyewear starting at only $795. Let's make those dreams a reality. So book your visit via 227-7000, WhatsApp message 278-2878, or at FerreraOptical.com today. We dare you to keep going. Ferrera Optical says, don't limit your vision.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
If you live with someone who's tested positive for COVID-19 and has to self-isolate at home, take care of them from a distance and reduce their movement around the house. Give them space, a designated space, and open those windows. If you have to be in contact, mask up, both of you. If you work, stay home from work and don't go out, not even to the grocery or pharmacy. And remember, no visitors allowed. Limit the contact to limit the spread.
The Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society. Mission-based, people-focused, community-driven.
Welcome back to the program. Today is Monday, March 28th. 2 days from today, we'll be celebrating, we'll be observing what has become a tradition in our midst. Now, the public holiday paying tribute to the spiritual Baptist community, Spiritual Shouter Baptist Day. That's Wednesday, March 30th. To help us understand and talk about what's coming down with that and talk about the significance of this movement. Elder Ray Bradford is our guest now. He's there. Good morning. Good to have you, sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right. Well. First, let me.
Well, first and foremost,
go ahead.
Permit me to say that there's no such thing as a Shouter Baptist.
All right.
The holiday is Spiritual Baptist Stroke Shouter.
All right. Why do you put this stroke? You mean it should start with Spiritual Baptists and Shouters because that's how.
Well, the Prohibition Ordinance called it the Shouter Prohibition Ordinance.
Yes.
And so that name was just adopted, the Shouter Prohibition Ordinance. But really, our people are Spiritual Baptists.
Yes. Well, forgive me, but my grandmother was one of those, and she used to refer to it as being a Shouter Baptist. But I understand the point you're making. And then it's separated. Well, my understanding is you could put that right if you like. Because you had other kinds of Baptists, what we call the London Baptists. They were a different group of people. And go ahead.
Well, in the 19th century, a group came out of London called the Missionary Baptists, and their mission was to give to our people a kind of Christianity that was relevant to London, to England. And out of that teaching came the Fundamental Baptists, the London Baptists, the Independent Baptists.
All right.
And there was a group who rejected that kind of teaching. And that group evolved to become the Spiritual Baptists.
Right. But that the tag about shouters remain, at least in a lot of people's configuration and imagination, and it's still used today. Because
well, yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I belong to a group called the Triune Shouters Baptists.
Uh-huh.
They adopted the name. They adopted the name that criminalized the faith.
Mm-hmm.
But I have no issue with it, really.
Yeah, you're just trying to say what.
Just the name.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about what's on the cards for Wednesday.
Wednesday, the National Congress of Incorporated Spiritual Baptist Organizations in Trinidad and Tobago, which is the largest, which is really a federation of spiritual Baptist archdioceses.
All right.
There are 9 archdioceses forming part of that federation, and each archdiocese is an umbrella body in itself. we will be assembling at the Shogunas Borough Corporation, and it will be a virtual concert type occasion, because notwithstanding the proposed change as of April, we'll be meeting in March. So we still have to be guided by the restrictions of the pandemic. So we'll be using the auditorium of the Shogunas Borough Corporation, and each of the 9 archdioceses will be meeting.
We seem to be losing you there. What? All right, I think we have to take a break and come back. We seem to have lost Elder Bradford there for a moment. Stay with us.
Burning questions, urgent topics. Welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix-It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix-It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole. It's for all of us in public.
All right, welcome back. Well, we continue our discussion with spiritual leader in the Spiritual Baptist community, Ray Bradford. You were talking about this event for Wednesday. You'll be honoring a couple of people. You want to go back over that?
We lost our patriarch very suddenly on December 7th, 2021. And he was part of our vision of where the faith will go and some of the things that we are having. You should know that the current government gave to the National Congress on behalf of the Spiritual Baptist Faith 2 10-acre plots. One 10-acre plot is intended for the construction of the Sacred Cathedral, Administrative Complex, and Heritage Park, while the second 10-acre plot is intended for the first ever Spiritual Baptist Cemetery and Crematorium. Brother Andy, you will know that every cemetery you go to, you will see the Roman Catholic, the Anglican plot, the Hindu plot, the Muslim plot, but nothing for the Spiritual Baptist.
Yes.
And therefore, this government agreed to grant us 10 acres of land. And this 10 acres of land is in Baster Hall, in the Sevilla, Couva area. And it will be, and the design will be for 2,000 cemetery plots plus a crematorium. That design is in progress as we speak. We have also been assigned 10 acres of land for Sacred Cathedral progress. The ministry and therefore this is in a very public area. You will see it from every angle, from the highway when the cathedral is finished, from the highway when you're going into Balmain-Vancouver, you will see that property. So that will be our means of celebrating and our gratitude to the government for those grants of those lands.
So is that, let me just ask this question, is that will provide for any member of the faith who is from any part of the country, if you die and you want to go there, you can go there? Because I said yes to the question earlier on.
It's for all of the spiritual Baptist faith.
Yeah, because I said yes when you talked about the differentiation in some cemeteries. And I want to tell you, the village I'm from, that's one of the pieces of pride in our village, because between Siparia and Erin, the only other cemetery that I know of is in a place called Los Bajos, which is where I'm from. And, well, you know, half the village who used to be Baptist people, and everybody's buried there, and there's no distinction in that cemetery, at least. You know, but yes. I know what you're talking about there.
But there was no corridor that says this is spiritual Baptist.
No, but they didn't say anything.
As in the other places.
Right, yeah.
Even though we used all the cemeteries.
Yes, yeah, I know what you mean. But it's good to have, as you say, that. So what is happening with other things about the development of the cultural center and so on? What work has...
Well, we have all the designs complete. Funding is going to be a major issue because it is not habitual for funding agencies to give to the spiritual Baptists. It is often amazing that you will see them give donations to other established churches. But as soon as the spiritual Baptist approaches them, they will say that they do not support religious causes. And therefore, that's a no-no for us.
So that's been your experience?
Yes, it's a very, very strong experience. Very, very compelling experience. That they will tell us that they don't support religious causes.
So we're using that is a signal that there's still some discrimination taking place concerning the faith?
Even though the act was repealed in 1951.
Yes.
The faith, listen, Andy.
Yes.
The faith was criminalized, you know.
Yes.
We were made to be criminals. And I will say to you that residue still exists. By the people, by the establishment, even state organizations do not support us. Even though the state is supporting us. We give credit to Dr. Rowley for indicating on March 23rd, 2019 in Moruga that spiritual Baptists in this country. That the state is the one, the then colonial state, and at that time there was no difference between church and state that enacted the Prohibition Ordinance. And he said that therefore nobody should be upset if the state assists the spiritual Baptists in the construction of the Sacred Cathedral, administrative complex, and Heritage Park.
So the challenge...
And that is why we got the lands and the $10 million first set of money as a donation.
So the challenge now is to raise funds to move ahead with those projects. And you're saying that
the challenge is now, and therefore I have a team sitting together with me. I am the lead person on the projects, sitting together with me for us to come up with options of how to raise funds. One of the things that we are doing with the early construction of the administrative complex is to put in some commercial centers that will allow people to rent spaces that will give us funds to maintain the properties. We are hoping that we could attract the large ones, such as the KFCs and those things, to take one of the commercial plots that will give us funds, because it will be very expensive for electricity and power and those things to maintain those properties. So up front, we are thinking about commercial centers as backups to help us along the way.
Yeah. And what about, say, schools, getting more Baptist schools in the country, or a greater recognition for those that exist?
Well, one of the things we plan to do on the 10-acre plot by the commercial center, by the cathedral, is to try to get a technology center established. We'll be discussing that with the government of Trinidad and Tobago for the establishment of a technology center. And that's one of our, I don't wish to speak too much about it because it's still an idea.
Yeah.
But I'll just share that moment with you.
Yeah. But despite that, Wednesday is going to be another day of celebration for the recognition of this. The 71st anniversary of the repeal of the Draconian Prohibition Ordinance of 1917. Yeah.
But I want to say if I have a quick moment.
Yes, go ahead.
Is that 1917 didn't start the prohibition against the faith and against African people. It really started 1800, June 30th, by a very infamous governor called Thomas Picton.
Yeah.
Who signed into law on June 30th that it is incumbent on slave masters to teach Christianity to their slaves, to give them some degree of morality. And I take offense to that, because you bring people from a sophisticated society in Africa and say that you have to give them moral conduct. Your style of moral conduct? Come on.
Yeah.
And therefore, the law said, Act 9 and 10 of that law said that any Negro caught with any elements that suggest that he's a witch doctor, a obeah man, and any such elements is subject to persecution by the law.
And in fact, that happened.
Yes.
In many cases.
The constabulary had the power to charge our people, and this is since 1800. 1919 was just the formal criminalization of the faith.
Yeah, 1917.
Because there are some of our people who rejected the white man's approach to Christianity. Because Christianity didn't start in Rome and Greece. It started in Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is the foundation of Christianity.
Yeah.
People misunderstand Africa. Africa was never the name of the continent. Ethiopia was.
All right, let's say we have to leave it there, but let's just go out with the notion that the people say, well, we have miles to go still before we get where we should be getting.
Still have a lot, and education is the key to it.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, my friend, and all the best in the next 48 hours with what's going to happen this year.
I mean, before you close,
go ahead.
I am now consciously aware of this television station. I want to congratulate the entrepreneur who has started this station. and he must have tremendous intention to be able to attract you to the station. I call you a Baptist man, you know. If your mother was a elder,
Yes,
what can you be?
My grandmother and my mother, yes.
If your mother was an elder of the Baptist faith, you could say what you want. You're a Baptist man.
All right.
And therefore, I credit him to bring that Baptist man on the station to make his station be a successful entity.
All right. Thank you very much. We will continue talking.
Praise God. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're very welcome. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we show you the COVID numbers, and we take a look around the region, and then we get into the discussion with Ambassador Peter Cavendish and his colleague from Ukraine. Who knew that we had a Ukrainian ambassador accredited to Trinidad and Tobago, but he's in New York, Sergei Kizlytsia. They're talking, standing with the Caribbean on the question of Ukraine. Much more to come. Stay with us.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the Content Capital.
I'm here with Andrew Lewis, sailor. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
The most beautiful thing about sailing, in my opinion, is it's where it was, originated from. It was a form of transport that was allowing people to connect different parts of the planet. And sailing today has become many different ways of life, but I have chosen the pathway of the Olympic Games.
For women to feel confident, we have to feel sexy. That doesn't mean outward appearance. It could be a mental state, it could be a physical state, it could be an emotional state. And if you choose to be liberal and if you choose to be conservative, that is up to you. I just give you the space to choose whatever you want to do.
What's up, Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
Welcome back to the program. Well, up ahead in just a couple of minutes, Ambassador Peter Cavendish. He's the head of the EU delegation in Trinidad and Tobago, and he's in Port of Spain and in New York. Ambassador Sergei Kizlytsia, he's the Ukrainian ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, but he's based in New York. We're talking about a joint statement put out by these governments, and including the British High Commission in Trinidad and Tobago, standing with Trinidad and Tobago and CARICOM on the issue of Ukraine. Before we get to them, however, let's just run through the numbers for COVID-19 on this Monday morning. The new positive cases, the totally recovered patients, the active cases, the number of persons at hospital. Let's put the numbers up on the screen. 267, the new positive cases. 191, the number of persons in hospital at the moment. 3 deaths reported in the last 24 hours. The total active positive cases, 7,388. The death toll stands now at 3,734. Those are the figures for this morning as we begin this week with COVID-19 in Trinidad and Tobago. All right, so let's get to this now. There was a joint statement which was published and issued in Trinidad and Tobago by the EU delegation, the ambassador of the French Republic, the ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany, the ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, the Kingdom of Spain, and the British High Commission in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, Ambassador Peter Cavendish is the head of the delegation of the EU in Trinidad and Tobago. He's our guest now, along with Ambassador Sergei Kyslytsya. He is the ambassador for the Ukraine in Trinidad and Tobago, but he is based in New York. Gentlemen, good morning. Good to see you, and thanks for coming on.
Good morning. Thank you for having us on the show.
All right, let me just read a couple of paragraphs from this joint statement that you all put out. Let me begin where it says there, the UN International Court of Justice ordered Russia on March 16 to halt its invasion of the Ukraine. The court cited that it had not seen any evidence to support the Kremlin's justification for the war. Putin and the Russian leadership bear full responsibility for these acts of unrestrained military aggression and all the destruction and the loss of lives they have caused. Most countries in the world stand with Ukraine and its people. The international community has introduced unprecedented sanctions in response to Putin's war. They are hitting his regime hard, and this will continue. The vast majority of Latin America and the Caribbean countries, notably CARICOM, have condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Together, we are standing on the right side of history with a sovereign free nation. We call on those governments that have not yet spoken out in public to join us and to bear testament to respect humanitarian law and its values, and to stand with the people of Ukraine. And the government of Trinidad and Tobago, among the CARICOM community, have done that. And gentlemen, they must be feeling some sense of welcome and warmth that you all have taken the decision to do this and to stand with the people of the region on that. Let's start with you, Ambassador Cavendish.
Well, your country has an enormous moral authority. It's a small island development state which has always maintained a very strict political moral integrity. It's certainly a highly respected international moral authoritarian voice, and authoritarian in the good sense. This is a country which has never carried out an aggression on any other country in the world, which always speaks with truth, decency and fairness. So as your country has spoken out, and it is encouraging also other people who may be reticent to speak out, we consider it's important to maintain a good dialogue with your government at this time.
Let's bring you in, Ambassador Kyslytsya. Good morning, good to see you. Thanks for coming on again.
Good morning, sir. It's my pleasure. I truly miss your country. I had a chance to visit it once, and I'm looking forward to be there again. Let me tell you, first of all, that no matter what your size is in the General Assembly, your country has the same voice as the United States, as Canada, as Germany, as France. It doesn't really matter, because the General Assembly is a truly democratic platform. It's not like the Security Council. So you should not shy away, and you do not shy away when you take a position in the General Assembly. And I think that people of the Trinidad and Tobago should be proud of how its government acts consistently in the General Assembly.
All right, one of the questions I wanted to ask, let's stay with you for the moment. So there's been lots of reporting on what has transpired, the actions that have been taken against the people of the Ukraine. The question, and some of them have been described as war crimes, not yet crimes against humanity. However this thing ends up, do you think that Mr. Putin will still face these charges of war crimes, Ambassador Kyslytsya?
I'm very, very confident that the days of Putin are numbered, and it doesn't really matter whether it is weeks or months. His regime is corrupt. His regime is finished. I can't imagine the world to continue to exist as it does until this point, with such a war criminal running such a huge country as Russia. So, as you probably know, and you know it very well, the ICC opened an investigation. There are 42 countries over the world who already referred the criminal investigations to the ICC. There is a discussion here in New York about accountability. Last Friday, we launched a group of friends on accountability for aggression in Ukraine. So I'm sure that the world finally has come to the point where it realized that it cannot and it should not keep going as it was between 2014 and now.
All right, Ambassador Cavendish, let's talk about how did you all go about deciding to issue this joint statement, and what do you think is the impact of that?
Well, the UN International Court of Justice ordered Russia on the 16th of March to halt its invasion of the Ukraine. The court has cited that it has not seen any evidence to support the Kremlin's justification for this war. Therefore, the European Union, with the definite moral backing of the United Nations, can see that this is an unjust, unprincipled war. It attacks all of the democratic values that we stand for. Therefore, the ambassadors here in the port of Spain, we discuss these matters and we decide how best to put this in the public domain to show our support for the Ukraine, our support for democratic values, which are universal values. And this is how these statements come about. The ambassadors review the materials and then we go out there, we make a statement. It's extremely important that we continue to recognize the excellent work that this country has done in the support of democratic values, in the support of a rules-based international order, and that we continue to encourage and go forward together whilst this appalling aggression is continuing.
I mean, this may be a question for somebody else looking on an independent body, but let me ask you, I stay with you, Ambassador Cavendish, what's the impact of that decision and of the statement that came out?
The impact of these decisions is that we make sure that Russia and some of its friends at this time understand that there's the 140 plus members of the United Nations system who are entirely appalled and disgusted by the actions that have taken place in the Ukraine. It's extremely important. Russia has lost the diplomatic war. It has lost the propaganda war. It has lost the political war. And we must make sure that we stand with the Ukraine till the end. And this war may last weeks, it may last months, we don't know. But it's very important that people understand the concrete nature of our support for the short, medium and long term, if necessary, for the Ukraine in this crisis.
You called out all that you see as the losses that Russia has suffered. But is there that means no possibility that Putin will have his day in the final analysis, you don't think?
I'm convinced he will not have his final day. I mean, you and I are of a certain age. This is a war that he has already lost. He thought he would take over a sovereign nation, walk in, kick down the front door and take control of that country. It's not a war of the Russian army against the Ukrainian army. It's a war of the Russian army against the Ukrainian army and also the Ukrainian people. Russia cannot defeat a nation of 44 million. Russia is a country which is in grave economic difficulties. It has a population of 144 million people, and they're producing about the same as Italy. The average Trinidadian is 50% more productive than the average Russian. This is not a strong country economically. It's a big country, certainly. It has a large population, certainly, but it is not serving the needs of its citizens. Russia has attacked Ukraine not because Russia is strong, but because Russia is weak. And it does not want a country with democratic values on its doorstep. It's Europe's democratic values, the universal values that we all hold together. That is the threat to Putin and his regime, and that is what he wants to destroy. All nations that hold democratic values have to stand with Ukraine.
Ambassador Kizitsia, you were nodding a while ago in relation to what Ambassador Cavendish was saying. Pick it up from there.
I think that what we have right now, we have the war of Putin against the entire nation and against the values that all of us share, and not only in Europe. I need to say that the fact that 141 countries vote in favor means that almost 3/4 of the General Assembly of the entire world is on the right side of the history. And I regret that the Russian population being cut off from the major flow of information. In fact, there is a law in Russia that criminally prohibits to mention that what happens in Ukraine is a war of Russia against Ukraine. So they may put you in jail for 15 years if you mention publicly that what's going on in Ukraine is a war. So you can imagine how undemocratic and how evil the regime is. And it's also, let me tell you, it's also a form of imperialism. It's also a form of new colonialism, because what Putin wants to do, he wants to colonize Ukraine against the will of the entire population. So one of the mistakes he made was not only the poor military judgment, it was the most flawed judgment about the sentiments of the Ukrainians. He repeatedly and publicly denied the existence of the Ukrainian nation. So, and you coming out from the era of colonialism, you understand very, very well how egregious this plan of Putin is with respect to the population of Ukraine.
Yeah, I want to ask you then. The President of the United States said, a couple of days ago, that in his view, you know what he said about Mr. Putin not continuing as leader in Russia. How can that come about? He said he wasn't advocating for regime change, but.
Well, first of all, I am not the spokesperson for the United States and neither for the White House. So Mr. Biden has his own spokesperson. What I can tell you from the other optics, Ukraine has had 5 presidents in the last 22 years, and we still have the same president in Russia. So there is no democracy in Russia, and I think that we are all, the entire international community is in long haul, because it is not only about the military victory of Ukraine over the invaders. It is also about what the entire world will do with the Russian Federation when the military victory is achieved, because it is similar, or probably similar, to what happened in Nazi Germany after the end of the World War II, and how the German society painfully had undergone the process of denazification. So I think that we have the case which is very similar, and the Russian society should undergo, for the benefit of the Russians themselves, the process of deputinization. We all want to have Russia a democratic member of the international community, but it cannot happen overnight after Putin is gone. We need to help Russians to build democratic society, to have a vibrant civil society, to have real parliament like you have in Trinidad and Tobago. So it's a long haul operation. It's not only about military victory.
Yeah. And your president, Zelensky, he's been saying recently that he thinks that the West can do more and should do more.
Yes, I think so. I'm sure, because if Putin succeeds in invading Ukraine, have no illusions, he won't stop. After he invades Ukraine, and God forbid, he will invade the Baltics. After he invades the Baltics, he will attack Poland. You can imagine the degree of calamity worldwide if all the architectures of the world are ruined: security architecture, economics, trade architecture, everything. All countries, including all the CARICOM countries, will suffer. And we cannot afford it. So the world finally, compared to what happened in 2014, when Russia invaded Crimea, in my opinion, here in New York, from what I see, has finally came to realization that it is a joint effort of the entire international community to defend Ukraine. And by defending Ukraine, everyone defends its or her interests. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to come back and ask you about, let's talk a little bit about the resolve of the Ukrainian people that has gotten you all to this point and looking ahead. But let me come back to you, Ambassador Cavendish. What do you think must be happening in the international community still to bring more pressure to bear on the Russian leader?
Well, we're going to see that Russia's energy exports to Europe are going to be curtailed over the short to medium term. This is certainly going to cause a calamity for the Russian economy. It's over-dependent on fossil fuel exports, and as I mentioned earlier, it has a very low level of productivity. The Russian economy is going to grind to a halt. The Russians cannot afford this war. So this is going to cause an enormous internal stressor within Russia. As to what will happen to President Putin, I cannot say, but I think the ambassador has made a very good point that, post-Putin, it's going to take Russian society a long time to recover and to build the necessary structures to become effectively a modern democratic state. There is no alternative. The only efficient way to run societies is democracy. And this is why the vast majority of countries follow the democratic path. Russia cannot be an exception. The long term that Putin has had in power in Russia has not been to the benefit of Russia. The European Union, of course, only supports democratic processes. We're rules-based. We believe in the rules-based international order. But the economic stressors that are now on Russia and bringing home to the Russian people what Russia's leadership has done are going to cause an enormous strain on their society. They are also themselves causing a great strain on the international community, with food prices becoming extremely high and very exaggerated, which is going to have impacts worldwide where countries which are food insecure will have to pay more to feed their citizens. So, we have certainly the possibility and the power to put a lot of more pressure on Russia, and we will do so. But regretfully, Russia is to blame for a lot of the problems we're going to see in food insecurity in the world.
So those things are going to happen. There will be some negative effects of it, but you say that you're saying this morning that the rest of the world, the free world, has more that it can do, and screws will be tightened.
Well, the full sanctions that we have announced are coming into play, and Russia is not going to be able to earn foreign currency to keep itself going as it has in the past. Russia has made. Europe is one of Russia's biggest energy exporters. It exports energy to us. It cannot easily turn off the taps and turn off the pipelines, and it hasn't got the logistics to deliver those products elsewhere. So Russia is going to feel an enormous consequence, an enormous economic downturn, and it's going to turn the clock back economically for Russia a very long way.
Yeah. What about the relations between Russia and China? Well, some observation about that is that China is not on the same side with the free world on this, and the majority of the membership of the UN on this.
Well, I think in some ways we have to see how the Chinese policy will develop. The Chinese leadership, I think, is characterized by pragmatism, and we shall see what shall come out of it. I'm not an expert on China, so I can't comment very far on that, but I think that China does want economic stability, does want peace worldwide. It does wish to pursue its own economic interests. And certainly its friendship with Russia must be a matter for internal reflection at this point in time. But I'm not a China expert, and I can't predict how their relationship will develop.
Yeah. All right. And you probably would have seen or been privy to conversations in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean where, among some people, they're not on the same side of this issue as you all are. How do you engage people who see some justification or see no reason to howl at what has happened with this invasion of Ukraine? What do you say?
Well, there's different groups who react. I'm sorry, there's people who are extremely cynical, who really, are attracted by autocratic leadership, including some in the West. But these people are a minority. I mean, the vast majority of people appreciate democracy, wish only the democratic system is to be applied. The vast majority want the rules-based international order to be followed. There are countries which have had a cynical sort of partnership with Russia and who are remaining with that partnership. There are others who have a long tradition of effectively neutrality, and again, that's their choice. But the vast majority of nations, 141 nations in the United Nations, have voted to condemn Russia's actions. The same number approximately have voted for a humanitarian resolution. Your country's been a sponsor of two of the most important resolutions in this conflict in recent times. So I think that those people who are casual or ambivalent or even admire a bit this so-called strongman behavior should reflect that in the short to medium and long term it's going to do nothing but harm to everybody involved, and such a destructive war is entirely unnecessary and uncalled for in the modern age.
Yeah, Ambassador Kislytsia, I wanted to ask if you can comment a little bit on what do you think the foundation of the resolve of the Ukrainian people in this, because they have thus far stood up probably more resolutely than most of us expected that they might.
Well, let me tell you, we Ukrainians are educated and we are genetically resolved to protect our nation. And we will fight until the last drop of blood defending our nation. There are millions of Ukrainians who are refugees in Europe now. But those 90% of them are women and children, while men are fighting in Ukraine. In fact, there is also a flow of Ukrainians who are coming back in hundreds of thousands from Europe and from the entire world. And those are men of Ukraine who are coming back to defend the country. There is not only the regular army that is fighting with the Russian invaders, it's also the Territorial Defense Force, and every single community, every single condominium or house is defending its territory. So Putin made a huge mistake deciding to go ahead, and he now pays dearly. You know that by today, according to the estimates of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, there are 17,000 Russian soldiers killed in Ukraine. We are calling on the international community, we are calling on the ICRC, Red Cross, to help us collect those bodies of the Russian soldiers and to repatriate them to Russia. The degree of the evilness of the Russian regime is that Putin does not want those bodies back. Putin does not want Russian mothers to bury their sons in dignity. In 10 years of invasion of Afghanistan, the Soviet Union lost less soldiers than Putin lost in 1 month in Ukraine. So you imagine this scale of tragedy. According to my government, and I read this news this morning, Russia is losing on average 500 soldiers every day. So 500 Russian families losing someone. Another side of the tragedy, to give you an idea, Ukraine was invaded by Nazi Germany during the Second World War. It was a huge tragedy. Millions of Ukrainians died in that war. But there are cities in Ukraine who now razed to the ground. And that never happened during the Nazi invasion. So you see how people look at that war today. There are people in Ukraine, there are still survivors, believe it or not, of the Second World War, who are in their 90s or in the late 80s. And imagine their psychological trauma, survived World War II, and they are passing their last days either being killed by the Russians or approaching their deaths under the Russian shelling. So the magnitude of this tragedy is immense. It's not even the comparable, as I say, in some cases with the World War II, what happened to Ukraine during the Nazi invasion.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sergei Kyslytsya from Ukraine, the Ukrainian ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago based in New York, and Ambassador Peter Cavendish, the head of the EU delegation in Port of Spain. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. All right, so we're going to take a break. We have news at the top of the hour, which is like now. We continue on the other side. Again, a man in Tobago responsible for reforestation and matters incidental there too. He's talking about the imminent rise in food prices because of this very war we just had this discussion about. So stay with us.
Seven is out, all day is in. WESN News on the hour.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing. We are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
In this season, we talk more about health, wellness, and everything in between. I am so excited to share with you everything about health and wellness so that you can design the life that you've always dreamed of. Join me here on What's Up Doc.
What's Up Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
Burning questions, urgent topics, welcome back to One on One, the show where we tackle the most current and pertinent subjects that are affecting all citizens, where we ask the hard questions and have in-depth conversations. What separates One on One from other talk shows is that the conversation stems from a younger perspective on topics that affect the fabric of our society. One on One, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. on WESN Content Capital.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
A reminder from WESN. We urge you to protect yourself and others from the spread of COVID-19. Stay safe by taking some simple precautions. Clean your hands often. Use soap and water or an alcohol-based hand rub. Maintain a safe distance from anyone who is coughing or sneezing. Wear a mask. Don't touch your eyes, nose or mouth. Cover your nose and mouth with your bent elbow or a tissue when you cough or sneeze. Stay at home. If you have a fever, cough, and difficulty breathing, seek medical attention. Following the above can help us all to help each other.
Welcome back to the program, Mr. Barry Lovelace. He's the man in charge of reforestation and matters incidental thereto in Tobago. He made a statement that was carried in the Newsday Tobago, which we decided to pick up on. He is saying when he looks out the window, he's seeing that the price of foodstuff will go up because of the war in Ukraine, about which we just conducted that discussion with these two ambassadors. Mr. Lovelace has agreed to talk with us on his assertions there. Good morning. Good to have you, sir.
Hello. Good morning, Andy.
All right. Well, good, thanks. But before we get to your feelings about food prices and so on, let's talk about the reforestation program. What exactly? Explain to us reforestation and watershed rehabilitation program. Let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, what does that entail?
Right. Well, it's the Tobago Reforestation and Watershed Rehabilitation Program.
Right.
It has some history in the National Reforestation Program, right, way back in 2004. Of course, coming up to 2012, that program would have kind of phased out. But the Tobago side of things kept on, the Tobago House of Assembly. And I mean, the program has been through its ups and downs and so on. But recently, in 2020, the decision was made to incorporate the program as a non-profit organization or a non-profit corporation, right? So it's now registered. And, well, of course, the new board was installed. It's a little over 50 days now, right? So young board with a somewhat renewed mandate and so on.
This was after the election?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, under the new administration. And so we're looking to somewhat, adjust the strategic direction of the Tobago reforestation program. Yes.
So what is it? Talk about some of the specific and the basics of what does reforestation mean in a Tobago context. You go and
right. Well, a big part of what our mandate is that of replanting trees in denuded areas. Places such as the Corland watershed that have been affected by years of human interventions, and so sugarcane and, of more recent vintage, a lot of forest fires and so on. So that's part of what we're looking to do. But the mandate is broader than that. It's not just about reforestation. It's also about conserving the forests that we have, right? Of course, I'm sure you'd be aware, we boast of the oldest protected rainforest in the Western Hemisphere since 1776, right? So looking after that is part of what we do as well. And so there are works in reforestation, there are works in forestry and watershed management, cutting trails and maintaining trails and so on in association with the tourism, industry and so on. But more than that, more than rehabilitating watersheds, right? And I'm saying this in the context of the new board, we are looking to strengthen that area of rehabilitating people as well, right? Whereby there's a socio-economic component that we want to strengthen, right? So persons that we recruit onto the program, and we're thinking that many of them will be young, unemployed people, young men, right, but of particular interest. That's a particular issue in Tobago here of young men. But you also have young women, single mothers, and so on, will be recruited to do projects in reforestation, forestry and watershed management, and also, very important, agroforestry, right?
Agroforestry.
Yes, agroforestry, combination of forestry and agriculture. And the idea there is that while they spend some of their time doing projects in these areas, right, as a significant portion of their time will also be spent in what I call socio-economic development, things like training in financial literacy, how to open and run, manage a small business, skills training, right? So for example, planting trees, you have to get the seedlings. So we'll have nurseries where they will get training in. But when they leave the program, and I call them cohorts, when these cohorts are weaned off of the program, they now have skills and confidence to participate in the social and economic life of Tobago.
Yeah, and that is a challenge?
Well, yes.
What are the challenges involved?
Say again?
What are the challenges involved?
In terms of what? The present challenges or the challenges we foresee?
Well, the current challenges.
Right. Well, in terms of the current challenges, of course, unemployment is a problem, right? And well, it has been a problem for a while now. But from my own perspective, and of course, we're discussing with the professionals in the social workers and so on to give proper analysis of the problems. But from my own interpretation, right, from what I see in villages, in the village that I live and the villages around, I see a serious problem resulting from the unemployment situation of young men especially, right, sitting about the block. Sometimes, I mean, you speak to them and so on, they don't desire to be there, but that's where That's where they end up, right? By the circumstances that have been thrown at them, right? So we're looking to intervene in some of those kinds of situations, right? And of course, we all know the challenges, especially that has been made worse over the last 2 years with the COVID situation. The economy is took a good hit. And so communities need help.
Yeah.
Communities will need help to become more resilient and to face the times that are up before us. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said this is an NGO. One would have thought this was.
The more accurate term is an NPO, non-profit organization. Of course, they have similarities, but it was established by the Tobago House of Assembly, and the strategy in doing that is that, well, one, for it's a management thing, but then two, it is expected that the non-profit organization, so being registered, will now be able to access funding outside of the THA to help with these programs and so on.
Yeah. So for the moment and for the foreseeable future, probably, you get your funding from the THA.
Yes. So the way I describe it, the organization is a child of the THA, but with time, we will grow, right, and become more and more independent and, owning our own funding and so on. And of course, there's also, in terms of the opportunities that present for partnerships with other organizations, whether it be private sector, government, or the third sector, and other NGOs, right?
Yeah, and so how critical is this as an issue for management and development in Tobago, reforestation and watershed rehabilitation? How critical is that?
How critical is?
How critical is that? These kinds of initiatives and reforestation.
Oh, like you mean in terms of the partnerships and so on?
Yes.
Well, tremendously critical, right? Because that's the way of the world in this era. You have to have partnerships to do anything of significant meaning, right? So we have to nurture those partnerships and so on. Yeah. And I must say that, over the last 2 weeks and so, there have been many discussions in that regard. Many different organizations we've had discussions with, some within the Tobago House of Assembly itself, right? Others in Trinidad, and I could name some of them.
Yes.
Right? You have the breadfruit.com, and I know that's something you wanted to talk about, perhaps.
Yes.
Right? We have the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance, the Trinidad branch of it, the Bridge Foundation we've been talking to, right? And even here in Tobago, the NGOs that are well known here in the Tobago space, Environment Tobago, Buku Reef Trust, Tobago Ark, Eric, Corbin's Wildlife Park. These are some of the many. And of course, there are some key stakeholders that we've only just begun engaging with. Right, and even this week coming, we have some meetings with some of them, like UTT and UE,
yes,
right, Centeno, right, and of course, this NGO is presently within the scope of the division of food security, natural resource and the environment, and sustainable development. Right, so the departments within that division, we have to have very close linkages with. That's the Department of Agriculture, dealing with food security matters. The Department of Environment, right, dealing with natural resources and forestry and so on. Then you have marketing, having to do with, agro-processing and so on. And then you have sustainable development. It's a large portfolio, but unnecessary. Yeah.
So Environment Tobago, sort of, you would say that one could agree that the reforestation or watershed rehabilitation program sort of is a stepbrother or stepsister to Environment Tobago, or a sibling or part of that very network?
Well, It's a little different. There are many aspects that are the same in terms of its registration as a non-profit organization. So we can, do the same things in terms of seeking grants to do projects and so on, right? But granted its special relationship to the THA, right? I would say that the Tobago Reforestation is positioned to act as a sort of umbrella organization whereby, we engage with some of these other non-governmental organizations, right? So similar, yes, but, somewhere between government, between the third sector and the first sector, that's where we are.
Okay, and so you were in this position sort of pre the election on December 6th, right?
No. Only 51 or 2 days or something like that.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this comes to this point now about how is it that you came to be talking about the possibility of food prices going up because of the war in Ukraine?
Well, as I said, we're in partnership with a lot of these other departments. The Department of Agriculture, for example, and their mandate is one of food security.
Yes.
Right? Now, of course, our mandate being reforestation and agroforestry, right? We saw an opportunity there. And given the context of the times that we are in, right? We just out of the pandemic. Well, out of the pandemic, I'm saying that with caution.
Yes.
Right? We took some blows, right? And then, of course, I'm sure you'd have observed in terms of the supply chain was affected, right? That whole thing with Canada and so on.
Yes.
And coming out of that now, a new challenge is before us, right? With the conflict going on in Europe there, right? And it threatens to, it's a threat to food security, right? If you look at the news and so on, all nations are concerned, right? As pertaining wheat in particular, right? And I mean, if you've been following this new administration's narrative, in terms of composite flour has been high on the agenda as something to look into, right? So combining the two things, right? We thought that, hey, breadfruit is a tree, right? It's in terms of its ability to sequester carbon dioxide and so on, it's very high relative to other trees and so on. And we are encouraging Tobagonians, people living in Tobago, to plant trees.
Yeah.
And plant forest trees, but plant fruit trees as well. And we're saying, while you're planting fruit trees, plant a breadfruit tree. Why breadfruit? Why they focus on breadfruit? Well, not that we're focusing on breadfruit alone, but the idea of breadfruit, holds a certain appeal in that, I mean, it's a wonderful plant or tree or fruit, whichever, because all of those are useful, right? Its potential as a staple, for instance, it's superior to rice in terms of its nutritive value as a carbohydrate. It's superior to potatoes, Irish potatoes, right? And it's a complex carbohydrate, which doesn't readily digest and shoots into your bloodstream, for diabetics and so on. It releases the energy slowly. So in that regard, it's in terms of its fiber content, very good as in terms of digestion and elimination functions and so on. It's relatively high in carbon and in vitamin C. And we know, of course, that this vitamin C's function as a natural immune booster, right? Vitamin C and zinc, it also has zinc. Then vitamin B6 as an antidepressant. It's potassium, very high in potassium, relatively speaking, right? And that regulates blood sugar and so on. Not blood sugar, blood pressure,
Well, when you say an antidepressant, you mean breadfruit can help people with depression?
Well, in terms of vitamin B6, it has been shown that people who normally suffer from depression, or put it this way, a lack of vitamin B6 is often associated with depression. And we know depression is a serious thing in these times, you know. The suicide rate is high and so on, you know. So if you flip that, you could say that vitamin B6 helps helps as an antidepressant.
Yeah. So you're saying we should eat more breadfruit than we do rice and potatoes?
Man, this thing is wonderful. In fact, I started calling it tropical manna when you examine the potential of this fruit. Right? Now, in Tobago, where you drive around, you see breadfruit trees. We don't know how many there are, right? But you see them around. But my thinking is, if by a certain time, say in the next 2-3 years or so, every household has ready access to breadfruit, right? Whether they plant it in the yard or is a communal plot down the road or something, but they know they have access to breadfruit. Now, just common sense, isn't that something, contributing to food security? In an era when the prospects of wheat flour, are questionable. Right? So it's a simple common sense idea.
Yeah.
And we think it's accomplished. We can accomplish it where we do in fact, how we approach the project is to first try to do an inventory of what exists, where are the trees, how many are there, right? And we believe that for a small population as well, we could work it out whereby we figure out how many trees do we have to have scattered across Tobago to be able to say that everybody, in terms of the energy needs, in terms of carbohydrates, could be satisfied over the years bearing of breadfruit.
Right. So that is the context in which you're talking about what the alternatives should be to what we now consume and what we now gather.
Exactly. On the first instance, that's a very basic goal, right? The very basic objective. Now, there are other higher order objectives like marketing, in terms of fulfilling some local markets, or even export market for value-added products and flour and so forth. Now, that's a higher order discussion for which is somewhat outside of our remit. But it's a discussion we want to stimulate and generate and support. Right? And this is why we're saying, even in this first phase of the project, we're looking to talk to all partners of interest. And we love to see the partners whose remit it is to fulfill those kinds of things, talk to us even more and plan with us such that we can have a good thing going.
Yeah, I want to tell you, you are a long way ahead of what you think about yourself, because you said when I approached you first, you said you wasn't sure that you could participate in this discussion because you're not this professional on this subject, but I don't know how much more professional one wants to be. I mean,
well, okay. I'm just talking based on common sense. I'm not. And this is why I'm cautious to say that larger discussion is outside of my remit in terms of the value added and flour and so on.
No, but
I know if I have a breadfruit tree in my yard, I'll sleep better at night.
Right. I think you represented very well, and more than that. But thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Barry.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, certainly. Let's take a quick look around the region. Now we go to Guyana, where News Source Guyana reports on some stuff about the latest from the president there, Irfaan Ali. It's not about the vice president talking about Trinidad and Tobago going to pieces and falling apart and so on. Here's the president as an insight into the government's intention to keep the current production sharing agreement with ExxonMobil and its partners in place, and matters incidental there too. Take a look.
President Irfaan Ali has made it clear that the government of Guyana intends to keep the current production sharing agreement with ExxonMobil in place, but will work to ensure that the country benefits more from future agreements. The current production sharing agreement, which gives sweeping tax relief to the oil companies and has been criticized for the 2% royalty to Guyana and other measures, has been facing a mountain of criticism.
We have an agreement, you have to honor that agreement, but we have made it very clear that there needs to be improvement on future agreements, and we're going to make those those improvements on future agreements. We inherited an agreement, but you have to respect that agreement. And on future agreements, there will be improvements.
The president said, however, that the focus now is to have more investments in exploration, noting that the government will support not only exploration, but development of oil fields.
And Exxon has been pushing a lot of their investment in Guyana. We're looking to move up to 1.2 million barrels per day. Within the next 3-4 years, 5 years. That, of course, is going to help us to accelerate development in other areas.
President Ali, who is attending a major forum in Latin America in the United Arab Emirates, said Ghana will learn from the experience of the UAE and other successful oil-producing nations as the country seeks to write its history as an oil producer.
We're not in competition with anyone, and we don't want to be in a race with anyone. And this is our global position. We just want to use the best examples, best practices to do the best we can do for the people of our country and the people of the region, giving them a better shot at life, a better shot at prosperity, and ensuring that the revenues help us to build an economy that reduces inequality and disparity. Those are key things for us.
During his attendance at the meeting, the president also discussed Ghana's efforts to support economic diversification, including investments in non-oil sectors, such as manufacturing, trade, and agriculture.
All right, so let's just tell you quickly what's in the news there this morning. There's this story, Last Supper, that's the headline, about a father of 7 who was shot dead during a fireside cook, so that's the front page. And on top there, you see that story that the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs had hit back against the Guyanese vice president for what he said about Trinidad and Tobago falling apart. That's the back page of today's Newsday, Trinidad and Tobago. This is the Newsday Tobago. And that story, it's a gross exaggeration. The quarrels between the outgoing, the last and the current executive at the Tobago House of Assembly, what's in place, what they found and what they didn't find. And on the back page, sport. So that's a look at these papers, our partners in this business. And that's our broadcast for this morning. We want to thank you for watching, and we tell you can stay in touch with us here on all our social media platforms. You can check us out at WESNCC there. Also, send your emails to amprime@wesncc.com. We'll have news at the top of the hour, followed by today's edition of Talking Point with Messrs. Shah and Small. But for now, I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.